Hello, my fellow jesters, and welcome back to the realm of cards, chips, and Cavendish hits. In the last episode, I introduced you to the general basics of playing Balatro, but today we're going to be searching our deck for some more potent options. I made mention of the shop, but I haven't delved into what can actually be purchased there. That's because I was saving it for this particular segment. We're going to be looking into the various consumable cards, enhancements, and additions. I'll also be talking about the vouchers and tags, card seals, and jokers that pair well with or are related to the consumables. I'm your host, Orange, and this is Outsmarting the House. Something I didn't talk about when it came to the jokers is how to acquire them. Of course, they're acquired in the shop, but jokers cost a variable amount of cash to purchase, depending on what joker it is, as well as other factors that I'll get to later in the video. Even then, it's possible to enter a shop without a joker available for purchase. In that case, you're able to spend your hard-earned cash re-rolling the shop to change the items on offer. This starts at $5 and increases by 1 for every subsequent roll, so if you're gonna do it, you'd best have a decent amount of cash in the bank. There are a few ways to mitigate the re-rolling cost, however, which allows me to touch on two other mechanics the game offers you, the tags and vouchers. I'll start with the tags. In exchange for sacrificing a trip to the shop, a player can opt to skip the blind they're currently at, excluding the boss blinds. When skipping a blind, the player is given a tag, which grants some form of bonus to the player as compensation, such as guaranteeing a free joker of a higher rarity in the next shop, making all the initial items in the next shop free, earning cash proportional to the hands played or discards left unused across the entire run, and a whole host of other benefits. One of which is making the rerolls in the shop start at 0. Outside of the tags, another method of lowering the reroll cost is through its corresponding voucher. Vouchers are passives that can be purchased during the run, which allow things such as getting more hands and discards, increasing the size of the player's held hand, increasing the amount of interest the player gains, making everything in the shop cheaper, and more. One of the vouchers, Reroll Surplus, lowers the reroll cost by $2, making it start at 3. However, each of the 16 initial vouchers in the game has a second, stronger version that only becomes available after purchasing the first version as a prerequisite, which for the reroll voucher lowers the cost to start at $1, effectively making it as good as the tag, but permanent for the run. There's a catch to the vouchers, however. 1, all vouchers have a buying price of $10, so they're quite expensive, and getting the stronger versions means you'll have to spend $20 in total to get access to them. 2, the secondary vouchers have to be unlocked before they even become available in runs, so you won't be able to make use of all of them for a good while. And 3, only one voucher shows up in the shop at a time, unless you get your hands on the voucher tag, which adds an additional voucher to the shop. And again, $10, so buying multiple vouchers requires having a lot of cash available. I'm not going to tell you how to unlock the vouchers, but I will say that Reroll Glut, the secondary reroll voucher, requires a lot of rerolling before it becomes available. Outside of using rerolls to find jokers or tags, because some tags can also grant jokers, the main method of purchasing joker cards is through the booster packs, specifically the buffoon packs. There are 3 levels of booster packs that can be purchased, which applies to all types of packs: normal, jumbo, and mega. Normal lets you select one from a few options, jumbo increases the number of options, and mega allows for the selection of 2 options. Their costs are $4, $6, and $8 respectively. Effectively any joker can show up in the buffoon pack, so when in doubt, purchase one. In the last video I said that it's more than possible to reach the end with jokers alone, but often it's a good idea to make use of the game's other upgrade mechanics, the consumable cards. If jokers are this game's gear, the consumables are stat increases, and the most direct form of stat increasing is related to the player's poker hands. You may notice that all of your poker hands start at level 1. In order to increase them, you can make use of planet cards. Located in the celestial packs and occasionally in the shop, planet cards, based off of astronomy, will level up their corresponding hand when used, which increases the base value of the chips and multiplier. If you want to better your chances of surviving the higher antes, or make a viable build with easier hands, these are a good place to start. Each planet card grants a certain amount of chips and mult per level up, which depends on the hand it corresponds to. The more difficult a hand is to make, the better the scaling. In order from the lowest hand to the highest hand, Pluto is +1 mult and +10 chips, Mercury is 1 mult and 15 chips, Uranus is 1 in 20, Venus is 2 in 20, Saturn is 3 in 30, Jupiter is 2 in 15, Earth is 2 in 25, Mars is 3 in 30, and Neptune is 4 in 40. Some of you may have noticed that Saturn cards, for straights, have better scaling than the other mid-tier hands that start at 4 mult, and Jupiter cards, which are for flushes, have scaling weaker than the Venus cards, which are for 3 of a kinds. This has to do with how hard it is to get those hands. As I mentioned back when I talked about the poker hands in part 1, flushes are extremely easy to make, since you just need to find cards of the matching suit. So to compensate, they have worse planet scaling, while the straights, which are some of the hardest hands to make, get the same scaling as 4 of a kind, which is the second hardest hand to make in the game. Now, I've only brought up 9 planet cards, but there are actually 12. However, the last 3 are secret planet cards, which only show up when playing a hand that doesn't conventionally exist with a standard deck of 52. These last 3 planets are Planet X, Ceres, and Eris, which show up for 5 of a kind, Flush House, and Flush 5 respectively. You need a way to get copies of the same card in order to get these hands, since 5 of a kind requires 5 cards of the same rank, Flush House requires a full house where all cards are the same suit, and Flush 5 is literally playing 5 copies of the same card. I'm not going to tell you how much these hands score. I'll leave you guys to figure that out for yourselves. As for how to get cards like that in the deck, there are a few ways. As I previously mentioned, the game has a wide range of booster packs, and one of those sets of booster packs, standard packs, contain extra playing cards which can be added to the deck. However, not every card you find in a standard pack is going to actually be standard. There's actually a pretty solid chance you'll run into a playing card that has some form of enhancement, addition, or even a seal on it. All 3 of these are modifiers that you can find on the cards themselves, rather than being tied to the jokers. Of course, there are drawbacks to adding more cards to your deck. The more cards there are, the harder it becomes to draw a specific card, as there become more potential options to be drawn into. Options that can very well brick your hand if you're not careful. For the unaware, bricking is a term used by strategic card battle players like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering, for drawing a bunch of cards that leave you with no options for making a decent or even valid play. And given Balatro is a game where you're given limited discards to search through your deck, and the cards you draw are effectively random, running into a bricked hand is very possible. So if you want to make your deck more consistent, you need a way to cut cards from your deck, or change the cards into one you can make use of via deck manipulation. And so we come to the tarot cards, the second type of consumable cards in the game, and arguably the most flexible. Located in Arcana packs, and again, occasionally in the shop, tarot cards are based on the major arcana of the tarot, and are typically used to modify the cards in your deck, and otherwise cause some rather strange effects. For example, the Sun, Star, World, and Moon cards can change 3 cards you select into their corresponding suits, which are hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs respectively. Strength can increase the rank of 2 selected cards by 1, the Hangman can destroy 2 cards from your deck, while Death lets you turn 1 card into a copy of another. If you've watched any of the RT game videos and have heard the phrase, convert the left card into the right card, that's where that comes from. The High Priest will generate 2 planet cards for the player, while the Emperor does the same for tarot cards, and Judgment can create a random joker for the player. However, there are 8 Arcana cards I want to focus on specifically. The Hierophant, Empress, Tower, Lovers, Magician, Justice, Chariot, and Devil are all cards that can apply enhancements, secondary effects triggered by the playing card. A lot of methods for improving scoring without relying on planet scaling will come from these. However, it takes time to build up a deck of enhanced cards. Most of the 8 tarots I mentioned here apply to 1, maybe 2 cards at a time. I'll start with Hierophant and Empress, because these are the 2 tarots that can enhance 2 cards at once. Hierophant creates bonus cards while Empress creates mult cards, the former adding 30 chips on top of the chips scored by the card's rank, and the latter adding, well, mult, plus 4 to be exact, as if you had a playable version of Jimbo upon scoring. These may not seem like a lot, and to be fair, they aren't, but given you can put these modifications on cards you're about to play in a hand, they can come in handy in a pinch, especially in the early game. The Tower and Lovers are another 2 cards that contrast when it comes to their enhancements. The Tower allows you to convert a card into a stone card. Stone cards have a scoring chip value of plus 50, but that comes at the cost of the card having no rank and no suit. It does nothing but tack points on the board. You sacrifice hand complexity for a flat boost. Not a problem if you're focusing on lower tier hands, actively detrimental if you are. The levers, on the other hand, creates a wild card. If you've ever played Uno, you should know a wild card can count as any suit. This makes it significantly easier to make a flush build or capitalize off of multiple suit-specific jokers. The problem is that this enhancement is still rather situational and can be shut down by every suit-specific boss blind. Worse, it can cause you to play a hand you didn't intend to play depending on what the other cards are, so you have to make sure you aren't accidentally playing a straight flush or some other unintended hand. The Magician and Justice tarot cards create Lucky and Glass cards, which are rather flimsy cards, but one's the type of flimsy that's inconsistent, and the other has the potential to destroy itself. Lucky cards are capable of granting plus 20 mult, or $20 when scored, but both are tied to rather unfavorable odds, 1 in 5 for the mult and 1 in 15 for the cash. So most of the time, these are effectively normal cards. Meanwhile, glass cards are a solid way of capitalizing on higher mult bases, doubling the mult when scored. This arguably makes them the strongest enhancement in the game, but the catch here is that they have a 1 in 4 chance to break, destroying the card. Depending on the circumstances, this may be something you actually want. Finally, the Chariot and Devil tarot cards create the two metal enhancements of the game, Steel and Gold. The interesting thing with these two enhancements is that they trigger when held in hand rather than when played, so the best course of action is to hold onto these cards to reap the benefits. Of course, that can make it hard to deck seek, because you have less potential slots to work with when discarding and scoring. The seal cards from the Chariot are more oriented towards scoring, acting as a 1.5 times multiplier. The more you're holding, the more useful the multipliers get. The Devil's Gold cards, on the other hand, are more econ focused, granting $3 when held. If you can hold on to them, they can provide quite the payout. Presuming you're able to stack enhancements together, you can make really good use of their effects, and even some jokers that are directly related to tarots. The most obvious joker to combo with tarot cards is the Fortune Teller, which provides plus 1 mult for each tarot card used during the run. After a lot of deck fixing, one can find this particular joker stronger than it first appears to be. For the other common jokers related to tarot cards, we have to look towards 3 which could be considered generators. Hallucination has a 50-50 chance of generating a tarot card anytime a booster pack is opened. This makes it a rather effective way of getting tarot cards in the early game, and should you find Oops All Sixes, that coin flip chance becomes guaranteed. The other two options are a little trickier to make effective. 8-Ball, commonly considered one of the worst jokers in the game, has a 1 in 4 chance to generate a tarot card upon scoring any 8s. The low odds are the reason it's considered so bad. Superposition is the other tarot generator, but instead of being down to luck, the activation requirement is much harder, a straight with a scoring ace. This effectively means you have 2 ways of activating superposition. Either you do 10 Jack Queen King Ace or Ace 2 3 4 and 5. That's also why it's called superposition. It's because Ace can either be the end or the start of a straight. One last thing worth noting is that anything that generates consumable cards will only generate consumable cards if you have the empty slots for it. Under most circumstances, you will have 2 of those slots, so make sure you leave at least 1 open, otherwise anything that generates consumables isn't going to generate anything. Several jokers only show up once specific enhanced cards are in the deck, though the chances of them showing up are still a bit lesser due to them being uncommon jokers. The uncommons are also the point at which jokers that synergize with planet cards become more prevalent. For example, Constellation, which is a multiplicative joker that scales by 0.1 times for every planet card you use. Buying every Celestial pack you see or making use of many High Priest tarots can make Constellation insanely strong. Among the uncommons, there are also ways of generating the third form of consumables in the game, the Spectral cards. Found commonly in Spectral packs, with 2 noteworthy exceptions which I will get to, Spectral cards offer some of the strongest deck manipulation options in the game. However, Spectrals are rare to come across and nearly all of them come at a cost, imparting some sort of downside for their usage, usually some form of destruction effect, or having a random element that can't be regulated. The aesthetics of these cards seem to lean towards rituals, voodoo, and generally magic-leaning concepts. The only spectrals that don't involve randomness to any degree when used are Deja Vu, Trance, Medium, and Talisman, which apply seals to a selected card. Hey, Editing Orange here. I done goofed in the script again. I completely forgot about Cryptid. Crypt is another spectral card, and what it does is it creates 2 copies of whatever card you select. And because you're allowed to select what card it duplicates, this technically isn't a random effect, so chalk that up to the list of cards that don't have any randomness in use. Seals are another form of effect that serve different functions depending on the seal, of which there are 4. In order corresponding to the spectral cards mentioned prior, red seals re-trigger the card, allowing it to score twice when played, or re-trigger an in-hand effect twice, depending on what card is being used for. Blue seals generate a planet card for the final scoring hint of the round, provided the sealed card is in the player's held hand, similar to a gold card. Purple seals generate a random tarot card upon being discarded, so there's another potential engine for strengthening Fortune Teller. And finally, gold seals earn $3 upon being scored. If you can get the re-triggers online, gold seals can earn quite the pretty penny. The spectral cards consistently allow for one final type of card modification: additions. These tertiary card effects are special because not only can they be applied to the cards, but they can also be put on the jokers, with the latter also gaining access to an exclusive edition. The 3 shared between both cards and clowns are foil, holographic, and polychrome. Foils grant plus 50 chips, holographics grant plus 10 mult, and polychromes serve as a 1.5 times mult. Unsurprisingly, foils are the easiest enhancement to find, and polychromes are the rarest. Granted, there are tags which allow you to find specific enhancements on jokers, but those are randomly given to jokers which spawn in the shop, meaning you have 0 control over what joker gets enhanced. Although polychrome jokers actually have a consistent way to attain them. The Hex spectral card can apply polychrome to a random joker, but at the cost of destroying all of your other jokers. Ideally, you'd want to use Hex on a specific joker by selling the other jokers prior. The same logic applies to Ankh, a spectral which creates a copy of a random joker at the cost of destroying the others. There's another way to put an addition on a random joker via the Wheel of Fortune tarot card, but it's only a 1 in 4 chance. The spectral equivalent would be Aura, which is the only way to put additions on playing cards outside of finding them in packs. And while you can select what card to put the addition on, you can't select which addition. That said, it's still a rare example of a spectral with no downsides. The other examples would be Sigil, which converts all the cards available for modification to a random suit, and again, the 2 noteworthy exceptions which I mentioned earlier. But before I get to mentioning those, I need to bring up the 4th edition exclusive to the jokers: Negative. Negative jokers grant an extra joker slot when in the player's possession, which is a bit of a roundabout way of saying negatives are free jokers. They don't take up any slots, meaning that having 1 changes the 5 joker limit and bumps it up to 6. 2 negatives would make the limit 7, and so on and so forth. Applying a negative to a random joker requires an ectoplasm from a spectral pack at the cost of -1 hand size, which costs more per consecutive ectoplasm up to a maximum of 3 times. A negative tag, meaning you get no control over what it lands on, or random chance from the shop or buffoon packs. Speaking of random chance, now is a good time to finally elaborate on those exceptions. There are 2 spectral cards that have a slim chance to show up in Arcanic and Celestial packs respectively: Soul and Black Hole. Soul grants 1 of 5 legendary jokers, which I will talk about in a later video, and Black Hole will level up all of the player's poker hands by 1. Making it one of the few spectral cards you will effectively always take. Not that you'll always have access to spectrals. Even the default spectral packs only have a 60% chance to show up compared to the other booster packs, which, given that standard Celestials and Arcanas have a 4 times chance of showing up, yeah, they usually get lost in the shuffle pretty frequently. Your next best option would be to utilize one of the jokers that generate spectrals, of which there are 2, Sixth Sense and Seance, both of which are uncommons. Sixth Sense is the easier of the 2 to utilize, generating a random spectral card the first hand of the round you play is a single 6. All well and good, except for the fact that the 6 gets destroyed immediately after. So presuming you're using this joker consistently, you'll have to restock your deck with 6s to keep the engine alive. The other option, Seance, doesn't destroy any cards, but you have to play a straight flush. You know, the most difficult poker hand. Not exactly ideal in most circumstances. Definitely possible, just not ideal. Given the amount of mechanics I've had to explain, it should be clear that there are a lot of ways to improve one's scoring potential in a Balatro run. Like with the jokers, it's possible to win a run using the upgrade mechanics alone. The game even has a dedicated challenge for it. However, the best runs use these mechanics in tandem with each other, often to capitalize off of synergies that can take one's ship count to the moon. I've made mention of a few synergies throughout this video, and even one in the previous video, but there are quite a couple more I'm excited to discuss with you. Now that all the cards are in play, I can finally get to explain builds, along with the more rare jokers. Well, presuming changes aren't made to the game in the near future to complicate matters. At the time of me finishing the script at 11:07 PM on the 28th of February, Balatro got added to Xbox Game Pass. So presuming you find this around that time frame and are just dipping your toes into the most addicting game in the recent years, I hope this guy is serving you well, because the stakes have been set and I'm going to be raising them pretty soon. If you want to take a moment to grab a drink and test out what I've told you, now is a good time. I still haven't explained everything since there's plenty to discover on your own, and again, I encourage experimenting and seeing what works. Just give me a moment to count my chips. I don't want to make everyone full too early.